One summer moment can change a child's life. Through Toys for Tots Give and Go initiative, your support provides books, games, toys, and outdoor adventures that spark curiosity, creativity, and a love of nature. Whether it's fishing, learning a new sport, reading under a tree, or playing with friends, these moments build confidence and lifelong memories. For too many children, those moments never come. You can help change that this summer. Visit toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots, delivering hope beyond the holidays.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me. Taxi. Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
And I'm Jake Novak filling in for the great Rita Cosby tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining us right now is former Oklahoma schools chief, and I mean K through college, Ryan Walters. And Ryan, we were talking in the last hour about this 250th anniversary. Here we are on this incredible occasion. I'm so lucky to have been alive and remember really well the bicentennial celebrations of 1976. Now we're at 250, and so much of what I think has been the letting of the air out of the tire on what should be a more euphoric weekend for America is the fault of the schools. You know this better than anyone. We are not giving people, the full picture of what to be proud of in this country. I really wish this were a bigger celebration nationwide. I'm sure it is in Oklahoma, but not enough, and speak to some of that, Ryan, because to me, we've really shortchanged our kids on a heck of a party.
No, I completely agree. And, this was done intentionally. So, you've seen the teachers unions, these radical left organizers at it for years to undermine America by undermine American education. And it began decades ago when you began to see an absence of talk and study around the founding, around primary source documents of, you got away from reading the Constitution, reading the Federalist Papers. You began to see an absence of that in schools. And then over time, you saw it replaced with the opposite of an undermining of American exceptionalism, of critical race theory, of DEI, of America's an evil racist place, of, you should, not only should you not admire George Washington, you should despise him. You should hate these individuals that forged our country. And so now you get to a point where those people are adults. And so much of, what we're trying to do is get education back on track. I so appreciate the Trump administration getting rid of the Department of Ed and really tackling this issue. But we've got to continue that fight, and we must for the future of America. But also, we have a large segment of our adult population that don't believe America was exceptional, that don't believe in American values and American principles, and frankly believe that America has been on a wrong path throughout its nation's history. And so you have a moment like this where, I tend to be glass half full, where I'm looking at it going, hey, look, I'm glad people are reflecting and looking back. But you are right, Jake, that so many don't view America in that way and don't have this ability to look at this as just a truly exceptional celebration of the greatest country in the history of the world.
Ryan, we're speaking with Ryan Walters, former schools chief in Oklahoma. It isn't just an attack on America. Look, pointing out the low points in our history is something I'm certainly not against. I just did it myself on a program a couple weeks ago. I did an entire half hour on the Dred Scott decision, which is the worst, not only in its morality, but in its actual legal workings, the worst decision in Supreme Court history. It's not about looking at everything with rose-colored glasses, but it is about. But if you leave out the big picture, it's a huge problem. But it's not just against the United States; it's an attack on all of Western civilization. There have been some states now that they have mandated study of the Bible in school. As in an academic sense, they're not going to have prayer sessions. It's going to be studying the Bible. And for people who are, their heads are blowing up about this, all I can say to you is good luck understanding art for the last 700 years if you don't know the Bible. Good luck understanding other literature. Good luck understanding Shakespeare. Lots of luck. because the Bible is, this incredible, if you don't believe it as a religious document, fine, that's your right. It's an important narrative piece of Western civilization. It's a huge, huge part of it. I mean, this is an attack on not just the United States. It's an attack on, I think, actually valuable education. It's turning it into political indoctrination, which is a great way to make people stupid. I mean, there's no other way to say it, Ryan.
No, that's exactly right. We were proud to bring the Bible back to our classrooms in Oklahoma and our curriculum, and it was exciting to see Texas do the same thing because, frankly, here's what the left's been able to do. If you unmoor education from truth and from the plumb line of understanding it from its basic principles, you can teach whatever, you can say whatever you want. I mean, you can convince anybody of anything. America is evil, racist, and all these things. If you don't have it tied to some of the valuable underpinnings of where it came from. And the reality is you don't have to be a Christian or a Jewish American or someone that practices any of those faiths to say, throughout American history, the Bible had an incredible influence. I mean, just read the writings of Washington or Franklin, of John Adams. Read what they say about religion. See what they say about Christianity and about its significance. Read nearly every presidential speech throughout American history and see references to the Bible. To your point, literature, art, how can you pick these things up? It was funny, I was just talking to my daughter the other day about East of Eden from John Steinbeck. It's like, can you imagine, reading Eden, what are they talking about East of Eden? I mean, it's just, you would be an ignorant person if you didn't have any understanding of the Bible, because you couldn't understand literature, you couldn't understand art, you couldn't understand just so much of the basics of our society. But that's what they want, because without that, they have a blank canvas to convince our students of whatever left-wing ideology they want, and that's what they've been doing.
Well, and, there is a guy in Israel who probably grew up getting sick of all the biblical references growing up. His name is Professor Yuval Harari, who literally wants to write a secular Bible, which doesn't surprise me because, first of all, I think he's just, listen, you grow up in Israel, or even if you're a tourist there, I get it. At every place you go, this Bible story happened, that Bible story happened. So maybe he's sick of it because of that. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I wouldn't know, and he's certainly not my patient. But I can tell you that this is definitely a huge stumbling block for them. I mean, I think there was one of the, every other movie out of Hollywood like 10 years ago was a dystopian movie, 10, 15 years ago. But wasn't there one called The Book of Eli where the whole thing is about like in a dystopian world, they find one copy of the Bible and it becomes so precious? That's, by the way, that's the story of the Jewish people for a long time. I mean, they found, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, 2,000-year-old parchment scrolls in the Bible. And then they compared them to the parchment scrolls that were in synagogues, today. And there's like 3 letters difference. I mean, the amount of care, having computers and carbon copies, the amount of care and devotion to every letter that entailed over 2,000 years and over 50, 60 countries all over the world, is pretty impressive. And if people are like that about the Bible in the New Testament as well, there's something to this, and you're making yourself ignorant. You're right. You're an incredible ignoramus if you don't know some of the basic biblical narratives. I mean, you really, I don't understand how you can understand art. I don't understand how you can understand so many other references in art. And that is really what a lot of this has to do. They're trying to create a whole blank new slate. That to me is really what's going on here.
And that's a rejection not only of the Christian views of so many throughout American history, but it's a rejection of just the fundamental way the founders viewed their role in the founding of America. They looked to history. They looked to their faith. They believed and understood that it wasn't going to be just, writing something from scratch, that they had to learn from history. They had to learn from the previous mistakes of other civilizations, and they believed that the country and the nation and the way that it was founded had to be tied to truth, which they believed came from God. And so what you see here is such what the left does, which is actually a rejection of true wisdom, a rejection of truth, a rejection of principle, and to rewrite things in a very Marxist fashion, that the world begins today, that knowledge begins with them. and it is truly ignorant and arrogant. And what you see, though, is when you press that upon young people, you get people like the mayor of New York City who get elected with these ideas that they pitches these new unique items and ways of viewing things, and you go, there's nothing new about that. As Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. These ideas have been tried again and again, and so often, frankly, in modern history, you study communism, Marxism, socialism, and it just makes you sick to your stomach of, I mean, my goodness, how many times are different people going to try the same policies that have been proven to be such a detriment to all peoples underneath them? But, when you have this absence of history, when you have this type of indoctrination, when you have this type of arrogant view, it's easy to get people to buy into that and do those things. And again, we're seeing history repeat itself, unfortunately, in New York and across our country. And, I do hope that as we're coming on the 250th anniversary, that you have people that, if you just go to the founding documents, if you just a cursory study will lead you to the understanding that the founders took their faith incredibly seriously. By the way, they not only in the founding era did they cite the Bible more than any other book, they cited the book of Deuteronomy more than any other book in the founding era by our founding fathers. This was heavily cited. It was heavily referenced. That's where they went, and I hope people rediscover the Christian roots of American history.
Yeah, it's important. We're talking to Ryan Walters from Oklahoma, so let's shift gears a little bit here, because our listeners should really know a little bit about what's going on the ground in other parts of the country other than New York and D.C. And, Oklahoma, oil and gas, such a huge part of the economy there. Love to hear what it's been like, this roller coaster the last couple of months of oil and gas prices shooting up higher and now coming down fast. I get the feeling, if I had a guess, the people in Oklahoma knew that this would be like this. In other words, they knew the volatility. I think they were speaking of Joseph, thinking of the Bible, I think they were being more like the biblical Joseph and knowing that this was a couple of months of fat years and they were going to get some lower prices pretty fast after that. Is that the way Oklahoma looked at this?
Yeah, exactly. There's no Oklahoman that's surprised by that at all. I mean, this is the oil and gas market as we know it. You understand the volatility of it, and you understand that it powers so much of the world today. Not only, us as Americans, but it powers the world. And, hey, we are drill baby drill country. We understand. We want America to be as energy independent as possible by continuing to, extract oil and natural gas. And we understand that what the market does with those things. And so no surprises here when it comes to that. We want to continue to see America take an approach that the Trump administration has when it comes to oil and gas, and we want to continue to see the Democrats, stay out of the way and stop trying to undermine that industry. And also, we want to continue to see the Trump administration have an America First policy when it comes to foreign policy, and continue to exert our strength throughout the world. So, yeah, there's no Oklahomans that are going, well, I can't believe there's some volatility in the oil and gas market. That is a yearly thing here.
Yeah, I just hope that they invested wisely with that windfall profit that came in those last couple of months, and do even more R&D and get even better at what they do. It's very important. We talk about the breadbasket of this country. We talk about the fuel centers of this country, and getting back to the founders. This was a huge part of their very wise undertaking of things like the Electoral College. That was the whole point. The idea that the farm states, this is before petroleum, but I think it's the same ideal there, that they would be more sparsely populated. They wouldn't have big cities, but if they didn't have an equal seat at the table, the country would starve. And I think in this case, the country will run out of fuel as well. Jake Novak filling in for Rita Cosby in our home stretch right now. We've been joined for this whole half hour by Ryan Walters, the former schools chief of Oklahoma. Ryan, what is your outlook on the midterms, and what about the future of Oklahoma politics? There's some turnover going on in that state. So give me your national picture, and then tell me about Oklahoma.
With the national picture, I hope folks get out and mobilize to vote. I know the teachers' unions are dumping, hundreds of millions of dollars into elections across the country. You've seen some bellwether areas and seen the influence that they have there. But look, I think that people look across the scene and they see what the Trump administration has done with law and order. I think they look and see what the economy has done under President Trump. I think they see a safer America and a safer world because of the Trump administration. And so, look, I hope folks get out to vote. I hope they mobilize. I hope that they're able to understand that the left, is going to use any mechanism possible to influence these elections, and they are, through the labor unions and other entities that they've got in place. They've got quite a political machine, and so, look, I'm optimistic. I think it's one of those things where you continue to see the left build out these operations, these political machines, and it's so important for, hardworking men and women across the country to exercise their rights and get out. And then, you've got some major elections in red states all over the country. You've got some major gubernatorial elections all over the country as well that, I think it's always so significant. You talk about federal elections, but you look at state elections, and, I always go, hey, red states have to act like red states. It's time for red states to truly be the beacons of what conservative policy can look like. So, I look at a lot of, the Republican primaries across the country and some of these gubernatorial races, and, these are significant decisions that can be the difference between, a handful of red states really showing the country how positive conservative policies work. You look at Florida, look what Ron DeSantis has done for the national scene because of leading from conservative policies in Florida and what a difference it's made for the whole country. I think you've got opportunities like that across the country, and I hope that we see those folks in those governor's offices.
Yeah, it's so important, whatever people feel about DeSantis and his presidential aspirations and whether your people are angry about what you just can't take away the way that he's made sure that improving Florida, making it more attractive every single day, how successful he's been at that. Now we need to see, and there's been plenty of other Republican governors who have done that in other states, but now we need to see more of that. And you can't just, to me, for example, Ryan Walters, the decision by the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago to negate race as a criteria to make congressional districts is potentially, to me, the most liberating thing that could happen for black people in this country since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and maybe even in the long run, even more, just as impactful, the most impactful thing, not just as impactful, as the Emancipation Proclamation, because millions of black people, because 90% of black people live in these feudal districts, are a foregone conclusion. No one has to do a good job for them. They're going to get elected anyway. They don't care. And now millions of black people are suddenly, if the redistricting happens soon enough, will suddenly become swing voters. That's what you want to be in America. You want to be a swing voter, but you can't be a swing voter, Ryan, if you don't go out and vote.
That's exactly right. Elections are significant when you've got people that are mobilized, you've got competition, you've got people that if they're an incumbent, hey, there's a real accountability because, hey, we might lose if we don't convince people to give us another shot. Or if you're new on the scene, hey, our ideas better win. We better, convince people of the job that we'll do, or we'll never make it in office. When it's a foregone conclusion, those pressure points and accountability mechanisms aren't there. So guess what? They're going to be much more selfish. They're going to be less answerable to the people, and that's a major problem.
All right, Ryan Walters from Oklahoma, thank you so much for joining us.